Welcome to Freya's Fairy Tales, where we believe fairy tales are both stories we enjoyed as children and something that we can achieve ourselves. Each week, we will talk to authors about their favorite fairy tales when they were kids and their adventure holding their very own fairy tale in their hands. At the end of each episode, we will finish off with a fairy tale or short story read as close to the original author's version as possible. I am your host, Freya Victoria. I'm an audiobook narrator that loves reading fairy tales, novels, and bringing stories to life through narration. I'm also fascinated by talking to authors and learning about their why and how for creating their stories. We have included all of the links for today's author and our show in the show notes. Today is part 1 of 2, where we are talking to Nichole about her novels. Over the next 2 weeks, you will hear about her journey of writing since she was a kid, adapting fan fiction to full-size novels, using people you know as inspiration for your characters, working through writer's block, writing with kids, and building your team. Heart of Conviction, Nathan. Nathan Valentine had given up from ever finding love. Instead, he dedicated himself to being the best doctor he could be, so no one ever felt the pain he had endured. Sadie Mosey was a single mom with another on the way. She only thought about how she was going to survive to the next day. Can they help each other overcome the pain of their pasts? The podcast is Freya's Fairy Tales, and that is fairy tales in 2 parts. It's both something that we either listened to or read or watched the movie of when we were a kid, and it's also the journey for you spending days, weeks, months, years writing your book and then holding that in your hand as a fairy tale for you. So
Yeah.
I like to start off with what is your favorite or what was your favorite fairy tale when you were a kid, and did that fairy tale change as you got older?
Okay. I'm trying to think what movie I was obsessed with because the books I read were not fairy tales. uh
It could be another short story or another story as well. I can usually find, something that can go along
I
with it.
read I read animal books then.
Okay.
So I think one of the books was called Misty and it was about a little girl who really, really wanted a dog.
Mhm.
And so she took all her allowance and bought a dog, but she kept it with a old lady who she watered plants for.
Okay.
And so her parents never knew. So she's like, I have my chapstick money. I'm not gonna get chapstick. I'm gonna use my money to get for the dog. And this whole time, her parents don't know this. And then the little old lady had, I want to say she had kind of heart attack. Something medical happened to her. And it was found out that she had this little beagle there with this little old lady.
Mhm.
And the little old lady's kids came and they're like, well, she's really attached to the dog. And the parents like, well, she can't bring it here. Like, we told her no on the dog. So she had to give the dog up to the little old lady, which in the end, the girl was like 12. And she's like, she better be with you anyway. You loved her more than me. I couldn't even get her dog food. Like, that was the story.
Okay. And so I'm guessing that didn't stay the same. Did what became your favorite as you got older?
As I got older, shifters became my favorite.
Any
I like
particular kind? Werewolves
I
or
like
other?
werewolves, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. If I have to pick a series that I am like obsessed with werewolves, it's by I can't pronounce names. I'm so bad with names. It's horrible. I can read them all day long. Don't ask me. But it's Charlie. It's I'm just gonna have to look right now because my brain don't work the way I want it to.
See, that's what YouTube is for me. If I have to look up like some author or whatever name, there's a couple websites that will give you name pronunciations. Cause
Ugh.
I'm like, when you're narrating a book, man, especially when I was doing mostly nonfiction, you don't want to screw up these people's names.
No, that would not be good. Okay. Charlie Adhara, it's The Wolf at the Door. It's a 5-book series. It's male romance. Big Bad Wolf series.
Okay, and so that was your
I'm just
favorite
gonna
as you got.
this
Okay.
is my but I really love Brave. I'm gonna switch. I like I like independent women, girls. Like
Mhm.
I liked how it switched, like with Mulan was my favorite.
Mhm.
See, my brain's clicking now. It takes me a minute to kickstart. To go back, like ADHD brain.
So then it
Mul-
became Mulan, fairy tale wise?
Fairy tale wise, it was Mulan because it didn't need a man. Like
Yeah.
not really. Like the love story was it wasn't about the prince and Mulan really.
It was that just so happened to be
It
there.
just happened to be there.
Yeah.
And then Brave, it was not even there. Like
And
it was.
so at what age did you think, hey, it might be kind of cool to write a book, or I know I'm going to write a book someday? Or at what age did you kind of start thinking you might want to write your own book?
Oh, I was like 8. Like I started writing like 8 or 9. I started doing stories. I actually wrote my first short story in my English AP class in the ninth grade. I was English AP in ninth grade before they took it away from me.
And so your first story, was that about shifters, or was that what was your
No,
first one
that was
about?
my first one was about tells you what kind of mindset I was in as a teenager. It was about a girl who became a famous rapper and came back to her school and rubbed it in everyone's faces.
Okay. And so how did that then evolve into, I mean, the book that I narrated for you is, he's one of 9 siblings that it's
Fan
definitely
fiction.
there's no shifters. There's I mean, the independent female is there because she's a single mom and all of that, but the, no shifters, at least not in the
No,
first book.
no, there won't be. In the Conviction series, there won't be any supernatural element to it.
So how
Uh,
long did it take you to write it, the first book?
I'm gonna say like a year. I wouldn't even say a year, but the the series started off as fan fiction. So
Mhm,
there's actually the first two stories are about Nathan's parents, but of course it's fan fiction, so I'll leave it there. Um, so the concept of his story was already like really already there. Like I had
mhm,
several chapters written, but it was like, do I continue as fan fiction? But if you know anything about the fan fiction world, they don't do well with originality.
mhm.
Like they want their characters like so I write Twilight fan fiction. They'd want Edward and Bella.
Right.
These are Edward and Bella's kids. It doesn't do well when it comes to like original stuff.
Mhm.
So like you know what, I've been writing fan fiction since I was 17. I was like, I'll just go and try to publish it.
Yeah.
I don't Nathan's story doesn't deserve to be a fan fiction. He deserves it to be original, and I'm not going to compromise his story because fans don't like originality
Mhm. They
when it
want
comes.
they want as close to the original, but twisted a little bit.
Yes, yeah. So, which is weird because the fan fiction isn't all that close to Twilight, obviously, because it's contemporary romance.
Mhm.
There's no, but it's still the character physique and clumsy Bella, whatever. So,
So, how long did it take you to write once you decided to, spin off and go into novels? How long did it take you to write Nathan's story?
so I started November. So November. I'm gonna say about 6 months.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No, but like it was not easy because like right about January, which of course it published in May, I had a massive roadblock on the second. Like so, you had the first draft, and then I was going through for the second draft, and
Mhm.
I had a massive roadblock where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what is happening right now. Like I had no idea. Like, and it was just horrible.
So, how did you work past that?
I powered. Um, it was more like a mental block. I had a lot of. It was 2020,
Mhm.
and okay, so 2021 is when I published. Wow, time's fake. I just want that out there. Time is fake. So I published in 2021. So I had in January and February, I had a lot of real life issues happen. So it wasn't the story, it was my real life, and it was differentiating, like getting rid of. Okay, I had to let go of my real life so I could dive back into the story and
Right.
realize it wasn't the story that was I didn't know what was happening. It was my real life. I had no idea what was happening.
Mhm. So you
So
had to
that's
kinda
how I
put real life on the back burner for a minute to be able to focus.
yeah, and then also I had a couple really awesome, people that were just like they're just, talking me through it and, listening to me ramble. I'm a bad rambler, like, I need to talk out loud about my problems, and then it just, like, clicks.
Mhm.
Typing doesn't help, I need to say it out loud. Like, "Oh, that makes sense now that it's out loud there. It's out there in the universe."
Now, having obviously not everybody that I've talked to have I had a chance to actually read through their book, but I obviously did get a chance to read yours. For anyone that doesn't know at this point, I actually narrated the first book in the series. Second one's not out yet, but I did narrate the first one.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, having read your book, I'm guessing it either you are an amazing editor or it saw an editor at some point.
I am not a good editor. Let me be clear. No, I'm not a good editor. I had some amazing beta readers,
Hmm.
and I had a friend, her name's Christy, and she, went to school for creative writing and like an English degree in editing. Like, that's her thing, and I
Hmm.
reached out to her, I'm like, "Hey,
I did a
um,
thing.
I wrote a book and I'd really like to publish it, but I'd really, really like it if you would go through it and let me know what you think." And she went
Hmm.
through it and like just I didn't ask her to edit it. I just asked her opinion and she just went through and started editing it. And I'm like, awesome, thank you. She's like, I had so much fun. Please reach out to me again for your next book because this was a lot of fun. And I'm like,
Hmm.
it was a lot of fun. And she did. She edited the whole thing. And I was more impressed that there wasn't that much that needed fixing.
Hmm.
Grammar and punctuation are not my friends. They're not my friends.
Yeah. Having read through, books all the way across the spectrum from not edited at all to, have seen publishing editors see them. I will say every book that I have read has at least some errors in it. And
Yeah.
usually, the you can only read through a book so many times, especially when it's your book, and not start like glancing over the errors. It's the same reason why they say narrators shouldn't proof their own stuff, because if
Yeah.
your brain saw the wrong word the first time, it's probably going to see the wrong word the second time and third time and fourth time too. So
Yeah,
do I
it's why
listen to that? No, but
it's hard, especially, like, when you're on a budget and everything like that. You're like,
mhm.
"Okay, where do I make the number smaller?" But and I know some errors made it too hard a conviction, which, like but it's like so many eyes were on it, but I was like, "Those errors were meant to happen."
Mhm.
Those errors were meant to happen because I had Christy and I had, like, 5 betas on it, plus I went through it, but as the author at that point, before I sent it in, I was done. I was tired, I'm like, "I can't see
Yeah.
the words." You can't see the words after that.
And so
And,
you said you were on a budget. How much did you end up spending to get the book ready to publish?
uh, honestly, I spent only for the cover and formatting. I didn't pay for an editor or anything like that, so I did D. Garcia, which is Black Widow design.
Okay.
I hope I'm saying that right. But, I did 250, and she did my cover, my paperback, ebook, and formatting.
Okay. And then have you spent any on I came across you
Advertising,
on TikTok, which you weren't doing, or I didn't come across a paid ad. You may have done paid ads, but
I will not do pay ads on TikTok. No, I have did some paid ads on Facebook, so
mhm.
maybe 50 bucks, so $300. I don't like Facebook ads, they don't do well, like, unless you're spending the thousands and thousands of dollars,
Right.
I don't feel like you're gonna hit that good target audience. And I got some clicks off the Facebook ads, but I don't. Facebook isn't what it used to be. Not even five
Yeah.
years ago, Facebook is not what it used to be. So
Yeah, I've found, as far as, so I don't advertise for other people's books on Facebook, but for like podcast advertising, I found that for my budget, I have it set for $5 a day for podcast advertising, which I realize is a lot, but I have a daily podcast that I do, and then I have this one that I do, and so each one I have it set for $5 a day to push it out there, but it kind of learns over time.
Yeah.
So like at the beginning, I didn't get a whole lot of traction on it, but now that I've been doing it since, well, this one since April, my other one since October, it's kind of learned, hey, these are the people that it does better with, which for my other one, it's like older women. So
That doesn't surprise me, if I'm gonna be honest.
yeah. Well, my other one is a fiction podcast, and so it's like, public domain, so, like, older classic novels, Jane
Yeah.
Eyre, Emma, Three Musketeers, like, old school,
Yep.
so that one I'm like, "Yeah, that seems about the right age group," so
I did, I did an ad. I spent like 15 it was like $15, and it was, like, over a one-week period just to see, and it did
Mhm,
not that it did bad, but the fact is, it's like, I'm not I know this sounds bad, but I'm not good as someone pointed out to me, I'm not a romantic person, so when I'm going through my book, I don't know the romantic moments. Like,
okay.
I'm writing through and I can't pick I know it's so sad, but I'm like, I don't know what the moments are. Like, who what to me, I can see what moments are for me, but apparently my moments aren't what most audience see as moments.
Okay.
Don't ask. I've let's like, for me, I like acts of service, so when someone is doing something constantly, I
Mhm.
see that, and that is my love language, so I'm like, "Oh, that's so romantic." Well,
Yeah.
apparently people like words, especially when they're reading, and
Yeah.
I'm learning.
Hey, well, I have to say, you didn't do a bad job writing it, so no,
Someone
the one thing in your book, I was like, so I'm reading through it, and because like they don't actually do anything, well, they do stuff, but like, spicy stuff. There's like little like light spice during the book. It's not till the very end that it's finally like, yes. But as I'm reading through, I have to say, I love the will they won't they. Like I like that dynamic. I like pretty much everything else too, but that's my favorite is the like tension and the build up to stuff happening. So,
Yeah,
and with them, her being a single mom and like adding in, the kid into the dynamic as well, kind of changes it a little bit more. Um, so now, when you wrote Nathan's story, did you know you wanted to write all the other siblings, or did you decide that later?
I always knew that everyone was gonna get a story. Uh, I know all their stories. Like, a couple of them changed, like, Ira stories changed. He's the oldest, the
Hmm.
lawyer. His
The
story
deepest
changed.
voice of the ones that I did.
Mhm. I I I technically have about 1 to 2 chapters written for all the siblings already.
Hmm.
Mason's story, obviously, I have the most written because he's next. But, I've always known I wanted all their stories. I want they all have a story, and they're all unique, and, of course, I have favorites. Most of all the stories have pretty much been the same for the last several years, other than Ira. He changed a little bit,
Hmm.
um, and I only one person knows how his story changed, and they just stared at me like, "Why would you do that?" I'm like, "'Cause I can." So,
Because it's my book and I can do what I want.
well, it's like I'm gonna confuse people, but at the same time, it happens. Considering he's married with 2 kids, so how does
Yeah.
that work? Yeah.
Typically, there's some kind of a falling out, and it's the rebuilding, or
Usually, yeah, that's
or new person, depending on how bad the fallout was,
yeah, and I'm really upset
or
because I love
death,
Sam.
or someone dies.
Yeah, I really love Sam too, and Sam's, like, a critical part, especially, like, you don't see the dynamic of Red, and Nathan much in Nathan's book, but, like, in this fan fiction, that's where their friendship builds,
Mhm.
like, and, of course, everyone tells me, "You should really turn those, fan fictions into originals so people can see that dynamic," but it's fan fiction and it's written in such a way that like, it'd be so hard to write, like, to transfer it to, like, original. My fan fiction writing and original writing are very different.
Well, I mean, and you could always get through the 9 books and then go back and do, like, the prequels after the fact.
I probably will because I played with them when I'm like have a major writer block. I'll go and I'll start playing with the names and changing over and stuff. And
Mhm.
I'm like, if anything, they'll be turned in like a short version, like a short story.
Mhm.
Not that they're very long to begin with, but like a shorter version.
Like novellas instead of
Yeah,
novels.
like take some chunks out of there. But like, so it was a woman of conviction and a family conviction. A family conviction is when all the kids come into play. That was heavily Nathan's story as a teenager. And that's
Mhm.
why I was told you really so they can get Nathan's teenager story. I'm like, I don't want Nathan's. Nathan's teenage story was very much heavily based off my dad. My dad was a man whore as a teenager. Like he he wasn't even 14 years old and he knocked up someone who was 18.
Okay.
By the time he was 16, I'm gonna say 16, he knocked someone else up and had to marry them. Of course, this is early 80s, so
Mhm.
it was a thing. So like his promiscuous ways were definitely based off my father.
I
Because I
don't
had
know that any author doesn't use real life people somewhere in there. It may not be
well,
all of the characters, but some characters will be based off of people that they know.
yeah, well, I had someone try to tell me it was unrealistic that he had that much sex as a teenager. I'm like, one, were you
Have
never
you
a
met
teenager?
teenagers?
Yeah. And I'm like, and two, it's realistic because it's based off my very crazy sexualized family.
So, are you done with book 2 or are you still working on book 2?
I'm on draft. So I had to scrap the first version of after talking to a couple different people and that read through the first version of Mind of Conviction, and we like I had to scrap the whole thing. So I am currently on chapter 13 of it,
Okay.
which is I've made a lot more progress and it's so much better.
That's good.
So no, I'm not finished, but I'm making a lot better progress now.
Mhm.
Mason has been so much fun. I guess my problem was the first round is I didn't know who Mason and Cynthia were, and I was just so stuck with
Trying to figure
who.
that out.
Yeah, I was stuck on. I don't know if you're on TikTok or what side of TikTok you get on, but I got stuck on because Cynthia is going to be Latina,
Okay.
full blown. She's not. It's and I got stuck on. I didn't want to whitewash her kind of thing,
Right.
and I got stuck on all this research, and then paranoia hit me. Like,
Mhm.
oh my god, I can't write her. I can't write her. And then after talking to several of my friends and stuff like that, they're like, I realized I don't need to make it about her background. I just need to make it about a woman falling in love, and
Right.
it made a whole it made it so much better.
You're like, "I don't need
Erased
5 chapters of where she came from."
no, I don't need to like all the background noise isn't even part of the book. Like it is for me to make her character believable and like
Mhm.
her characters and stuff like that. But I don't need to be as paranoid. And then remembering that Nathan's the man child of the family, like you like have to I have to remember he's the sixth kid. He's the first biological child of Liam. Like he's
Mhm.
like has his own mental health issues, but like he's a child actor. They have all kinds of like weird ticks, and he's a cinnamon roll. He pines. I Nathan was like this alpha cussy kind of guy. Mason is not like
Yeah, I
he
mean, in the first, like I think it starts with something about, like, "I hate fucking paperwork," or something like that, and I'm like,
like
"Alright."
oh yeah, I got like there was a couple people
I have
like they
explicit warnings on this podcast, so it is what it
oh it was
is.
like it was fuck paperwork. And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
I fucking I was channeling uh my brother, like literally every other word is F, is fuck this, fuck that. So
Well, I have to
but
say too, yours was probably the first book with any substantial amount of language in it, which I don't necessarily have a problem with at all, but it was just like the first time that I had to, and then because most of it's in the male perspective, I'm like, all right, so we have to drop all this stuff in the male voice. I'm like, okay.
yeah, no, Christy, she was like, I don't know, do you realize you used the F word like 8 times? I'm like, yes, I do.
Yes,
It's who
yes.
he is. She's like, do you feel like you really need that many F words? I'm like, I write like my writing style is I'm that character when I'm writing. So if my character, I have to do what he would do.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, that's how I
and
write
say,
too.
yeah. So like Mason don't cuss. Like he kind of cusses, but he really doesn't cuss like that. So
Mhm.
he'll use freaking or occasionally you'll see hell, but he's more like a man child who's like 22 years old and he's had everything given to him between his rich daddy or the fact he's a pretty famous actor.
Mhm.
And he has Cynthia's his PA and she
Well, and you
don't put
kind
up
of
with.
got glimpses of their dynamic in the first book. You kind of got a little bit of that in
Yeah,
there, like that, "Man, she's driving me crazy, whatever, whatever."
yeah. It doesn't change because I try to put in like when you become from a very wealthy, famous family, you can't really trust anybody or trust really.
Right.
I feel like everyone has a motive. Even when you're not rich, everyone has a motive, I feel. But like when you have
Somewhat, yeah.
that extra incentive of look at the name, look at the money, and then he's in the public eye. But in the book, Mason's very much over that at this point because it's 8 months. It's well after Heart of Conviction, and now it's just like I need to figure out how to get Cynthia closer. But
So, you wrote and you published book 1, and so
yes,
you said you did that last year. Now, I didn't come across you till this year because I didn't really get on TikTok until the very end of last year.
yeah,
Um, so you are obviously a different story because I think we talked about you planned on doing audiobooks, you just hadn't, like, gotten to that point yet when I found your TikToks and approached you to ask
yes.
about it. So how did that feel for you? Or, kind of what was your thinking prior to being approached by me? Like, when
So,
did you think you wanted to do audiobooks versus, how do you think the process went? What did you like and not like?
I actually it was about July. I want to say between July and August of 2021 because
Mhm,
I was talking to several. I want to say it's no, they're not book talk after dark anymore, but it's a Discord. I don't know if you ever ran across them on TikTok, but there's a group on Discord and it was called Book Talk After Dark. I don't know what it's called right now,
mhm.
but and they were talking about how like a good chunk of them are all audio listeners because a lot of them have like carpal tunnel. It's really hard for them to like
Flip the
they all
pages.
want to, yeah. And they're like, "Are you going to turn your book into audio?" And I'm like, I got to look into it because I know it's kind of expensive, and I didn't have a lot of information about uh, what we use, the ACE XC or
ACX.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went and I did look into it, and I tried doing the auditions, but I was so overwhelmed, and I had a narrator approach me about it, and he kind of was very condescending to me, and then in that moment, like, yeah, I don't think I'm ready because he was very condescending to me and he's like, well, I could do it for this profit, but you'd also have to pay for it too. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying to me. And then you figure I've never done audit. This is my first book. This is my first
Right.
step into anything.
Mhm.
So I didn't like the feeling. I'm like, you know what, right now is I don't think is the time for me. And I put it on the back burner and I was like, I'll think about it maybe after book two.
Okay.
And then when you approached it and I had a better feeling and you were actually nice and were like you weren't condescending about it and you were like, "Well, I can read." I was like, "All right, I don't know about pain." Like that's what like really confused me is they're like, "Well, yeah, we're going to do the what we did the royalties thing, but you
Mhm.
would also have to pay me." And that really confused me. I'm like, "Why would you also get royalties plus I would have to pay you?" That really confused me and made
Mhm.
me feel really stupid. And I don't like feeling stupid.
So it
I don't
was
think it.
Yeah, I mean, just so you know, there's 3 different ways on ACX you can
Okay.
hire. There's royalty share, which is what we did, where you
Okay.
only get royalties. So me and you will split royalties for 7 years unless you decide to buy me out.
Right.
Then there's royalty share plus, where you give basically a small stipend up front. So, like, I've had some that, like, they wanna pay the narrator something so that they feel like, "Hey, I put some money into this," but then they're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I can't afford full rate to pay it all up front." So they'll
Okay.
pay, say, like, $50 to $125 up front and then royalties for 7 years. or you can pay it all up front where you're going to pay, a higher rate because I don't make royalties. So
Right.
there's the three different options, but yeah, that doesn't sound like that was well explained, and I think a lot of authors don't understand what it's called royalty share plus, so it's royalty share
Yeah,
plus a upfront stipend, basically.
yeah. See, that would have been better understood, but, like, it didn't no, it didn't come across that at all well, and I don't know because I said, "I'm a new author, and I've never done this before, so please be
Right.
patient with me so I can understand." I wasn't against paying somebody, it's just he was like, $500 plus royalty share, and I'm like, what?" Like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's a lot. Not that he wasn't worth it, I just knew
Right.
that was very much out of my price range,
Right. You're
and
like,
I
"I haven't
was
even spent that on the whole book at this point."
yeah, and it's like not that because I know audiobooks and everything are a big deal, especially to be done right.
Mhm.
So it's not that it's not worth it. I just knew that that was not me at this point,
Right.
and I feel like I'm diminishing you. So I'm sorry. I hope I'm not
You're
doing that.
fine. No, 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 no. No, well, and then just so everybody knows, like our experience, you were my second ever person to message and be like, "Hey," and the reason that when I approach someone, it's, if you are already promoting your books, like actively promoting your books on TikTok, that's a reason for me. One, like, I will not audition for books that I don't like the cover. Like, that's like a
Oh,
huge, like, if the cover is bad, I'm like, I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover. Everybody does. Everybody does. I don't care
I know it's one
what
of
you're
those
not
things you need to
supposed to
just
do.
admit it. Just
Yeah.
admit
So I'm
it.
like, and I've been very honest with that up front. Like, if I don't like your cover, I'm not going to do it royalty share because I don't think, same reason I won't do royalty share for nonfiction. I just don't feel like they're going to sell enough to make it worth it. Where if it's, especially if it's a series, cover's well done, the author's promoting, I feel like in 7 years, it may be a slow snowball to making money off of it, but
Yeah. There's
um,
gonna be yeah.
I mean, you're gonna make something, but I do this, and this is gonna make me sound terrible as a narrator. This is my like on the side hobby that I do. So while I completely have no problem with narrators that do it full time, and I would never cheapen what I do, and I'm to the point now in my narrating where I'm asking for not doing royalty share because I still think if you're an author and you want your book done in royalty share because that's all you can afford. I have no problem with doing books that way. Like I still do a lot of royalty share books, but on ones that, you're established and you're wanting to pay and you've got the money to pay and whatever, by all means, I'm not going to say, "Oh, I'll take some really small amount of money and cheapen what I do."
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so then
No,
what
it
was it? Cuz I talked to you, reached out and I said, "Hey, if you want me to," I think it was like, "If you want me to send you an audition, here, email, 3 to 5 pages to this email address," kinda thing. So
yeah.
what was
I
it like to hear that for the first time?
I'm going to be upfront too. I'm not an audiobook listener. My brain don't like it. Okay. My
Okay.
brain don't because okay, so the way I read a story and it's like it's a whole movie playing. So I have narration, I have action, I have the whole scene played. So when I hear an audiobook, it interrupts the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
So it took me a minute to really listen to it. So I had to have a friend help me listen to it
Okay.
who listens to audiobooks. I was like, okay, I need you to listen to this with me to help me. She's like, this is really good. I'm like, okay, okay. So I try and I almost cried because the scene I sent you is the scene I needed was the most important scene to me.
Mhm.
Uh one of the most important scenes. But
Well, I
like,
think that's what I asked you. Send me a scene that you like, this will be the defining if the narrator is good or not, is if they do this
yes,
scene well. That's what I asked you to send me.
yes, yes. And I was like, yes, this is awesome. Um when you sent me the other scene I wanted to really listen to was the hospital scene when he has the hospital scene uh with Sadie when you sent me all the clips to review. I went to that scene before I listened to anything else and listened to that one too. Because I wanted to make sure because that scene's so pivotal to me because it's the emotion. I
Mhm.
always worry that I'm not writing the emotion well. So I'm like, I hope she did the emotion come across. And I so which came off so well. I started crying like that's all I cared about. That's all I cared about. And it took me forever to write that hospital scene. That's a moment in itself. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and quite honestly, any of those high emotional scenes, I don't know if this happened in your book, but I've had a few where I get myself to the point where I'm almost crying, so you can hear that in my voice, and then, you gotta suck it up so you can move on to the next scene, but,
Yeah.
like and I'm one of those weirdos not weirdos, I can make myself do that. I can get myself to cry by thinking about, something ridiculously sad, and sometimes I did one story, my father died in November after years of suffering from diabetes related complications. And so I recently narrated a book where the main character had cancer and was dying through the whole book. And it was too soon, too
Yeah.
soon. And so that one is the first one that I actually had to stop while narrating several times to get myself together enough to be able to do it without actually sobbing into the microphone.
Yeah, I couldn't.
But, yeah, and I won't do one of those books anytime soon. That
Yeah.
was rough.
Yeah, I
So,
couldn't.
and I mean, so for me, on the narrator side of things, so I reach out to you and I'm just like praying. I'm like, please don't because you don't know people that are self
Yeah.
publishing. It could be it never saw an editor. It's like terribly done and it's going to take me forever to narrate it because I got to fix all the issues at the same time. Your book was not like that, which
I'm so
very,
happy because I was really
very
worried.
thankful for because like it takes me twice as long to narrate something that's full of issues. And so I stay now, when I talk to you, it wasn't this way, but I stay pretty booked up now. So, like, if I see something that's bad, I have to cancel contracts because I don't have I'm too booked to have the time to fix that. Um,
Yeah.
Now I do have an author that I also edit for. Hers is different because like we have an agreement.
Right.
I edit her books. She's editing and beta reading my books. So or alpha reading technically because she's reading as
Yeah.
I write it. So
That is like I have to praise because I have a horrible habit, especially right now because I'm going through a massive imposter syndrome, like crushing. I don't like
mhm,
reaching out to people and asking for help. But that is
right.
like the success. If you ask any successful author, public, traditional or indie, whatever, it's a team. It is
Mhm.
not a single person. It is a team. It's the alpha, the betas, the editors. It's an entire team of people. And I don't have a team. Like I have occasional people, and
Mhm.
I always wait till like the last minute, and then I draw back. Like,
Well, I've seen on TikTok so you asked what side of you didn't know what side of TikTok. I am on both the reader and the author sides of TikTok, so I get
yeah,
both along with narrators. So I get narrators, writers, and readers. I get all of their
yeah,
stuff and other voiceover people. So voice acting in general,
yeah.
writers and readers. So I get all of them, but I've seen a lot of authors have good or what I think is good response from like asking for ARC readers and asking for beta readers and stuff. Like, hey, reach out to me if you're or prior to in I don't know if you know this, in January or February of this year, they made it where you can't put a link in your bio until you have over 1,000 followers.
That's
And so like
actually I find that interesting. So I've been part of book. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I've
you're
been
fine.
part of Book Talk since about October. I want to say August of 2020,
Okay.
and that's always been a thing. You had to have 1,000 followers for a link. Now, if you go to a business account,
Mhm.
you can put a link in your bio, but you can't do certain things in a business account because of copyright issues.
Well, now, as of January or February of this year, a business account can't until it hits 1,000. Because I
Okay, so
have
that's what's changed.
Yeah, so I have, like, the Freya Victoria profile, I started in January just before that, so on the Freya Victoria one, I have a link in there that takes to my website with my list of links, but
Right.
the podcast one, I started after that, and so I can't have a link, so I have to tag my Freya one so you can go there to get the link. It's
It's
annoying.
so I was gonna say, I know back in the day, I feel it's like time's fake, like I said, but like back in the day, a lot of people were like, go to my Instagram. like, before
Mhm.
they could get this out, like, go to my Instagram, and they'd have Instagram don't need so many followers, you could just have the,
Right.
link in there, and I'm not I just started recently doing random things, like, I started doing book reviews on my TikTok lately as
Mhm.
a creative outlet because I haven't been wanting to talk about my writing.
Yeah,
I
if
don't know
you're
where
so
it's
you said
going.
you're having imposter syndrome. I feel like I also deal with that. Now, probably in the last 2 weeks, I've stopped. I mean, at this point, I have narrated almost 50 books across 3
That's so
different
awesome.
names. So, like, I have like, Freya is my, like, fiction name that I narrate with, but I have 2 other names that I started with my actual name and then went, "Hmm, I probably don't want all these under my name." One, my actual name is impossible to say, so then I started another name, and then I did, like, all nonfiction, and that's where one of my other podcast is I host under that name, and, for that one, like, my family and stuff know about it, but then I started narrating spicy books, and I was like, "We need to." I've done these like Christian nonfiction. I need like okay for spice
Yeah,
scene where the two aren't going to clash. And so, in my books, my writing is spicy, not ridiculously, but more than
yeah.
your book was. So
See, I get awkward,
I
I
read a
was
lot of it. I feel like that probably helps. So
oh, do not get don't mistake me. I read, like, a lot, like, a lot, and I read kinky stuff, like, ooh, but when you read it, then go to write it, it feels different.
yeah.
I don't know, for me, it feels different because I I don't know, I view sex differently, I guess. I don't it's very complicated up here in my
I
brain.
I actually had the author that I edit for, so the way that we ended in the me editing for her, she hired me based on an audition from ACX and was like, "I like you, whatever, whatever." And then she was like, "Hey, if you notice any, errors in the book, let me know and I'll get them fixed." I'm like, "Cool." So I start reading through and I'm like, "Hey, I'm noticing quite a few things. Like, do you just want me to like throw it in a Google Doc and I can like edit and leave comments for like what I changed and you can approve it or not?" So that's the way that we still edit today. And well, I've finished 2 books. We're contracted on a lot more. I
Yeah,
just, have to get to them. Um, but yeah, so that's how we do it. We throw it in a Google Doc. I edit. I leave comments for here's what it was, so she can see like the
yeah,
difference and change it back if she doesn't like what I did. Um, but yeah, so that's and then I started writing a couple months after I met her and I was like, "Hey, can you like check this out cuz I want to make sure like I think it's good,
yeah,
but I want to make sure." And so I sent like her a link to the Google Doc and then I sent my best friend a link as well and was like, "Hey, cuz my best friend reads a lot as well. Not spicy usually, but it is what it is."
yeah,
And she gets to, like it finally gets to, will they, won't they, little things like spicy kisses up against the wall and all this, and then it
yup.
gets to, like, stuff actually happening, and she sends me this meme of Christina Aguilera, like, fanning herself, and I'm like, "So I can tell what scene you just got to." But then I had my at the end of March was my 10-year anniversary with my husband, and so we went out to a town near us that has, like, a lake, and we went and we stayed at, like, a hotel, and we ate at this little shopping center near there for a weekend, and we were talking about he is dyslexic, but very, very creative. He does the blacksmithing, he does, like, other, like, handcrafty like, wood carving, like, very crafty person, but he was talking about, "Yeah, I've had, like, this book I've been, like, in my head writing since I was, like, a teenager, but I've never, I think with the dyslexic, I'm not gonna be able to get it done, whatever, whatever." And I'm like, "Dude, write your book." And me and his brother went to school for the editing and English and all of that, and so I'm
Yeah,
like, me or your brother or a combination of both of us will get it edited. Like, don't worry about that. And so we're talking about his storyline, and then I started having another story that, like, that weekend, it just embedded in my head. And
Welcome,
and
welcome
then
to the plight of writers.
and then I'm 30,000 words into this other book, and this can't get the one to shut up in my head. So now I'm doing all this mythology research for that book that I haven't actually started writing yet because it'll be in the mythology subgenre, and I don't want to screw that part up. So it's different from contemporary where it's based on real life and or even other fantasy where, werewolves and vampires and all of that has been redone so many times. You have pretty much free creative license to do what you want with those. I'm like, no, when you start getting into you're using the gods from mythology, you
You
kind of
get a
don't want to
little
mess that up.
pickier.
Yeah. Well, and you want to make sure while you need to take some creative license to make it your own. In my head, I'm like, I don't want to change it so far from what people know that they're
Yeah,
like, "What are we doing?"
yeah, that kind of, like you probably don't, but there is a male-male romance book by Haley Turner that does something like that. Um, it's with the gods, but it's all the gods across, so it's, like it's really cool, like, so you have the angels from Christian, and you
You're
have,
gonna need
like,
to send me
Zeus.
that because that's what I'm trying to do. I had no idea something out there was like that.
It's I don't it's you can always do it differently, but obviously it's about I'll send you a link. I think you'd be interested
Okay.
in looking into it.
Yeah, because 'cause I'm
Uh,
planning on combining, like, Greek and Roman, which is essentially Greek with different
yeah,
names, and, like, Japanese and Chinese and Egyptian, and, like, I'm still
yeah.
haven't figured out
I'll s
how to do it, but I'm planning on
I will I will
meshing.
s I will send you a link because
Okay.
obviously you'll do yours different, but this might give you a
Right.
baseline of what to look at.
Well, I'm reading through ACOTAR right now, and that one is actually in the mythology subgenre, but it's like they don't use the gods' names. I feel like have you read those books? I know they're big on
No, they
Book
don't
Talk right now.
interest me at
Okay,
all.
so so it's fantasy, subgenre is mythology, and I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna wrap that in, but they have, the big bad beasts, I feel like are based on, like, the titans of Greek mythology. It's just
Yeah,
very, like, the big bad from, like, the beginning of time and, like, all of this, and I'm like, I can see now why. But there's also the fae and the whatever in there too, um, and some
um,
shifting. There's some
okay,
shifting
we're
stuff,
talking
but
so they have, the Olympus gods.
mhm.
They have gods from all different cultures,
Mhm.
and they use the names, and they kind of do a small background of them of why they're there, but they're all, like, there's I'm so bad at names, but you have MC1, and he's contracted like a soul bound to Persephone
Okay.
because his family essentially stole and killed Persephone and Hades' daughter. So he has to make it correct. But he's not just for Persephone, but for all the gods.
Mhm.
Because the gods need to be believed in again. They're losing their power
Yeah.
because humanity doesn't really believe in the gods anymore. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think
But
the first mythology one I read, I don't remember the author's name. There's no audiobooks, and I've reached out to her, like, several times now, like, "Please let me narrate your audiobooks," because I've read the books twice now, and I love them. But it's like the characters or not all of the characters, but there's this family that are all descendants of the gods, and they all have,
oh
like, these powers of the gods in this family, and it's the same relationship. So Zeus and, um I'm terrible with names. It's Athena, Zeus and Athena, I think. Anyways, it's like all the couples are still couples in these descendants or whatever, and
oh, you're thinking Hera. It's Zeus and Hera.
okay, yeah.
Athena
Um
is Zeus's daughter.
So it's they all have modern names because 'cause they're these
Yeah.
descendants they've essentially bred with humans, and they're these descendants of the gods living on our world, and this girl gets, like, mixed up in it and throws a wrench in everybody's plans
They
and all that, so and I've read a couple other ones like that, but, um, I just I don't know. That's the book that is taking over my brain is those ones now, but because I want to do a mishmash of everything, I have to know at least a little bit. Allie loved the story Misty about a girl buying a dog when she was younger. The Three Dogs is a German fairy tale. Andrew Lang included it in the Green Fairy book, listing his source as the Brothers Grimm. A version of this tale appears in A Book of Dragons by Ruth Manning Sanders. It is Arne Thompson, type 562, The Spirit in the Blue Light. Other tales of this type include The Blue Light and The Tinderbox. Today we'll be reading The Three Dogs from Andrew Lang's Green Fairy book. Don't forget, we're continuing the original story of Beauty and the Beast on our Patreon. The Three Dogs. There was once upon a time a shepherd who had two children, a son and a daughter. When he was on his deathbed, he turned to them and said, "I have nothing to leave you but 3 sheep and a small house. Divide them between you as you like, but don't quarrel over them, whatever you do." When the shepherd was dead, the brother asked his sister which she would like best, the sheep or the little house. And when she had chosen the house, he said, "Then I'll take the sheep and go out to seek my fortune in the wide world. I don't see why I shouldn't be as lucky as many another who has set out on the same search, and it wasn't for nothing that I was born on a Sunday." And so he started on his travels, driving his 3 sheep in front of him, and for a long time it seemed as if fortune didn't mean to favor him at all. One day he was sitting disconsolately at a crossroad when a man suddenly appeared before him with 3 black dogs, each one bigger than the other. "Hello, my fine fellow," said the man. "I see you have 3 fat sheep. I'll tell you what, if you'll give them to me, I'll give you my 3 dogs." In spite of his sadness, the youth smiled and replied, "What would I do with your dogs? My sheep at least feed themselves, but I should have to find food for the dogs." "My dogs are not like other dogs," said the stranger. "They will feed you instead of you them and will make your fortune. The smallest one is called Salt and will bring you food whenever you wish. The second is called Pepper and will tear anyone to pieces who offers to hurt you. And the great big strong one is called Mustard and is so powerful that it will break iron or steel with its teeth." The shepherd at last let himself be persuaded and gave the stranger his sheep. In order to test the truth of his statement about the dogs, he said at once, "Salt, I'm hungry." And before the words were out of his mouth, the dog had disappeared and returned in a few minutes with a large basket full of the most delicious food. Then the youth congratulated himself on the bargain he had made and continued his journey in the best of spirits. One day he met a carriage and pair, all draped in black. Even the horses were covered with black trappings, and the coachman was clothed in crepe from top to toe. Inside the carriage sat a beautiful girl in a black dress crying bitterly. The horses advanced slowly and mournfully, with their heads bent on the ground. "Coachman, what's the meaning of all this grief?" asked the shepherd. At first, the coachman wouldn't say anything, but when the youth pressed him, he told him that a huge dragon dwelt in the neighborhood and required yearly the sacrifice of a beautiful maiden. This year, the lot had fallen on the king's daughter, and the whole country was filled with woe and lamentation in consequence. The shepherd felt very sorry for the lovely maiden and determined to follow the carriage. In a little, it halted at the foot of a high mountain. The girl got out and walked slowly and sadly to meet her terrible fate. The coachman perceived that the shepherd wished to follow her and warned him not to do so if he valued his life, but the shepherd wouldn't listen to his advice. When they had climbed about halfway up the hill, they saw a terrible-looking monster with the body of a snake, and with huge wings and claws coming towards them, breathing forth flames of fire and preparing to seize its victim. Then the shepherd called, "Pepper, come to the rescue!" And the second dog set upon the dragon, and after a fierce struggle bit it so sharply in the neck that the monster rolled over, and in a few moments breathed its last. Then the dog ate up the body, all except its 2 front teeth, which the shepherd picked up and put in his pocket. The princess was quite overcome with terror and joy, and fell fainting at the feet of her deliverer. When she recovered her consciousness, she begged the shepherd to return with her to her father, who would reward him richly. But the youth answered that he wanted to see something of the world, and that he would return again in 3 years, and nothing would make him change his resolve. The princess seated herself once more in her carriage, and bidding each other farewell, she and the shepherd separated. she to return home and he to see the world. But while the princess was driving over a bridge, the carriage suddenly stood still, and the coachman turned round to her and said, "Your deliverer has gone, and doesn't thank you for your gratitude. It would be nice of you to make a poor fellow happy. Therefore, you may tell your father that it was I who slew the dragon. And if you refuse to, I will throw you into the river, and no one will be any the wiser, for they will think the dragon has devoured you." The maiden was in a dreadful state when she heard these words, but there was nothing for her to do but to swear that she would give out the coachman as her deliverer, and not to divulge the secret to anyone. So they returned to the capital, and everyone was delighted when they saw the princess had returned unharmed. The black flags were taken down from all the palace towers, and gay-colored ones put up in their place, and the king embraced his daughter and her supposed rescuer with tears of joy. And turning to the coachman, he said, "You've not only saved the life of my child, but you've also freed the country from a terrible scourge. Therefore, it is only fitting that you should be richly rewarded. Take, therefore, my daughter for your wife, but as she is still so young, do not let the marriage be celebrated for another year." The coachman thanked the king for his graciousness, and was then led away to be richly dressed and instructed in all the arts and graces that befitted his new position. But the poor princess wept bitterly, though she did not dare to confide her grief to anyone. When the year was over, she begged so hard for another year's respite that it was granted to her. But this year passed also, and she threw herself at her father's feet and begged so piteously for one more year that the king's heart was melted. And he yielded to her request, much to the princess's joy, for she knew that her real deliverer would appear at the end of the 3rd year. And so the year passed away like the other 2, and the wedding day was fixed, and all the people were prepared to feast and make merry. But on the wedding day, it happened that a stranger came to the town with 3 black dogs. He asked what the meaning of all the feasting and fuss was, and they told him that the king's daughter was just going to be married to the man who had slain the terrible dragon. The stranger at once denounced the coachman as a liar, but no one would listen to him, and he was seized and thrown into a cell with iron doors. While he was lying on his straw pallet, pondering mournfully on his fate, he thought he heard the low whining of his dogs outside. Then an idea dawned on him, and he called out as loudly as he could, "Mustard, come to my help!" And in a second he saw the paws of the biggest dog at the window of his cell, and before he could count to 2, the creature had bitten through the iron bars and stood beside him. Then they both let themselves out of the prison by the window, and the poor youth was free once more, though he felt very sad when he thought that another was to enjoy the reward that rightfully belonged to him. He felt hungry, too, so he called his dog Salt and asked him to bring home some food. The faithful creature trotted off and soon returned with a table napkin full of the most delicious food, and the napkin itself was embroidered with a kingly crown. The king had just seated himself at the wedding feast with all his court, when the dog appeared and licked the princess's hand in an appealing manner. With a joyful start, she recognized the beast, and bound her own table napkin round his neck. Then she plucked up her courage and told her father the whole story. Then the king at once sent a servant to follow the dog, and in a short time the stranger was led into the king's presence. The former coachman grew as white as a sheet when he saw the shepherd, and falling on his knees, begged for mercy and pardon. The princess recognized her deliverer at once, and did not need the proof of the 2 dragons' teeth which he drew from his pocket. The coachman was thrown into a dark dungeon, and the shepherd took his place at the princess's side. And this time, you may be sure, she did not beg for the wedding to be put off. The young couple lived for some time in great peace and happiness, when suddenly one day the former shepherd bethought himself of his poor sister and expressed a wish to see her again, and to let her share in his good fortune. So they sent a carriage to fetch her, and soon she arrived at the court, and found herself once more in her brother's arms. Then one of the dogs spoke and said, "Our task is done. You have no more need of us. We only waited to see that you did not forget your sister in your prosperity." And with these words, the 3 dogs became 3 birds and flew away into the heavens. Thank you for joining Freya's Fairy Tales. Be sure to come back next week for the conclusion of Allie's journey to holding her own fairy tale in her hands and to hear another of her favorite fairy tales.